Welcome again to everyone who's joined us for our Living Locally, Thinking Globally taster session today. Just a quick outline of what we're going to be covering in this session. First of all, you're going to hear a little bit from Catherine Bates, the Programme Manager for Professional Studies, a very brief introduction to what the degree involves. And then the focus is going to be a little bit different today. We're going to hear what different students who've been on the programme for a number of years have pursued in terms of their own research with a local and global focus. So we're going to hear from Emma Bailey on identity and representation and Mason Hassan on waste and consumerism. And then Catherine's going to give us some more information in a bit more detail about the structure of professional studies, the different directions you can take in your degree. And we're going to hear at that point as well from Nisha Redmond-Poku, a graduate of professional studies who's kindly joined us today. So thank you to all the students who are and ex-students who are coming to the session today and giving up their time to join us. We want you to take part throughout, so I hope you've picked up on all the different ways that you can participate that Jenny's just been outlining, and there'll be various pauses for questions and participation. But please, if you do have any questions at any point, do put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll try and deal with them as we go along. And then we're hoping there will be time at the end for a longer discussion and question and answer session. So I hope that's okay with everybody. Welcome FBI, who's just joined the session, and I'm going to hand over to Catherine now to begin the taster for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my video for a little bit so you can just see my face. Hi everyone, I'm the Programme Manager for Professional Studies, and I'm just going to say something really briefly about what this degree is about. It's a degree for mature students, for adults returning to learning, and we really want to put the students and the knowledge and experience that you're bringing in through your work experience, life experience at the centre. The easiest way to think about it is it's split into 3 strands. The first I'm calling, and I'll use my little pointer, the interdisciplinary strand. I'm calling that Who Am I? That involves exploring the world that we're living in now by considering contemporary issues from a variety of different perspectives. We look at ideas of identity and diversity, global perspectives, health and society, and the research that the students are going to be talking about with you today has mainly been inspired by modules on that strand. So that's one of the reasons I'm giving you a mini overview now. We've also got the professional strand. That's when we're looking at ideas to do with career development and what the world of work is demanding of us today, how we can do things to change the world of work, and build up those skills to change careers. And that strand also involves a set of research modules where you get to choose areas of your own interest to research. And that's the other thing we'll be finding out today from the students' mouths themselves. What did they choose to research in their final dissertations, in their final year? What did they find out, and how was that research inspired by the learning that they did on the programme? And then the third strand is the discovery and pathway strand. And I've called that What Am I Building? Because this is the element where you're actually building your own degree. You're choosing for a third of the degree what modules you want to take. And those are either modules that you're choosing from the Lifelong Learning Centre. We've got areas of specialism, creative writing, business, child and family studies, learning and teaching, or you could choose modules from the wider university. And there, the choice is only restricted from what the university offers, but we've got lots and lots of departments: languages, philosophy, history, sustainability, law, lots of choice. So you're really building up and designing your own degree. Okay, and hi Manira. So we've got quite a few people to participate now, so I'm going to move on, because the exciting thing about this session is that you're going to get to hear from our students. So I'm going to pass on to Emma Bailey. Emma's going to introduce herself, and then she's going to take you a bit through her research and also give you a chance to discuss it a bit. So Emma, over to you.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Emma. I have currently just finished my final year of professional studies, and this is just a short presentation about my undergraduate research on identity and representation. I became interested in my research topic through one of my first year modules, which was exploring diversity. This module looked at different aspects of diversity, such as the effects of systemic and institutional racism through case studies like the Stephen Lawrence murder, as well as looking at diversity in the workplace and the cycle of oppression. On this module, I looked at Lenny Henry's BAFTA lecture, where he discussed the lack of diverse representation in film and television, both on and off screen. Looking at this alongside Chimamanda Ngozi TED Talk, where she explains about the dangers of a single story, really helped me understand that narratives are a really powerful thing, and by only seeing one narrative, it can really affect how we identify ourselves, as identity is a process we continuously go through. I chose this topic as the discussion on representation has been an ongoing discussion, more so since the boycott of the Oscars 2014-15, because there was no diverse nominees that year, despite the fact that there was major blockbuster movies such as Creed. Then again, this happened this year at the BAFTAs, where they had no diverse nominees. However, in 2018, Black Panther was seen as a major milestone in challenging and changing how Black people and the African culture were normally represented, which leads me to my next slide, which is a 5-minute activity where we can discuss how you all think Black males are represented in film and television.
Okay, so to get involved in this discussion, you can either share ideas on the slide here or in the chat, or you can press the little person at the bottom here and raise your hand and put your microphone on to talk to us. So just as a reminder of what we're talking about here, for you, what do you think are the main ways that Black males are represented in film and TV? You could share ideas of characters that come to your head straight away, or what do you think there's dominant stereotypes, dominant ways that you think Black men are represented, or Black boys? So we just need someone to get us started. So you could be typing on the slide, in the chat, or if you want to think it through or think through the question, you can raise your hand and let us know. What do you think? And there's no wrong answers here. What we're doing is thinking, what are the stereotypes? What might be some of the issues of the way they're represented? Or what are some characters that come to mind? So we've got stereotypes of gangs, drug dealing, hoodies, so lots of association with crime. We've got house help, interesting, being involved in gangs, gangsters, so a big focus here on gangs and kind of crime culture. Raquel's talking about, so I think they're definitely underrepresented. That's a good point. So it might have taken the time to just think, how are they represented if we're not seeing them on television as much? And more often than not, when they're represented, they do not have a major role. So there might be a side character, or it might be quite a negative role. So maybe a main kind of antagonist. Absolutely, and thanks, Raquel. I think you've also put that onto the main slide. One-dimensional as well. Yeah, Niche is coming on and agreeing with Raquel. And yeah, Andrea, completely agree. We're not necessarily getting those complex characters when we're thinking about how Black men are represented. We've got the idea of marginalised, so people that are seen as on the margins of society, of drug dealers or being involved with drugs. So there seems to be quite a lot of agreement here in terms of the way in which, anyone think of any more positive representations of Black males? Or, if not more positive, are there any characters that come to mind, or any particular films or TV programs you think are a particular problem, or might be a bit better than the usual ones? Any thoughts? Anyone want to raise a hand and say anything about this? Celebrated in sports, sometimes if they're doing well. Yeah, so I think in terms of, if we think not just of stories, but of news stories, a different kind of story, yeah, definitely. And if we think of, and I can't remember who's the name of the footballer who's just got the government to change their mind about free school meals.
Marcus
He's very,
Rashford.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. So really positive. So that's maybe changing the way we're thinking about black men, an amazing role model. Solomon, you were going to say something. Did you want to speak? You just have to make sure your microphone's on.
No, I wanted to mention Rashford, but it's already been said. I'm okay.
Oh, well, it's nice to hear from you. Yeah, absolutely. Marcus Rashford, absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for coming in there. My brain at the moment is terrible. Any other thoughts? Any other negative or positive role models people can think of? No? Well, if not, we will move on. And what's that then? That's done is warmed you up to think about, well, it's interesting to see what did Emma do in her research and what did she find? So I'm going to move that on and pass back to Emma.
Hi. So my research involved looking at what had been previously written on the representation of black males, and I found that most of what had been written focused on sitcoms and dramas. So I decided I'd focus my research on science fiction and fantasy television programs with lead black males, as science fiction and fantasy has a lower percentage of diverse representation. So I chose Luke Cage and Black Lightning, as they were both available on Netflix, as even though these are American shows, they can be seen globally on Netflix. I looked at the signs and symbols within the show to see what messages they produced about the main characters and how it linked to what was going on outside of the shows. So, for example, I looked at what each character wore, as clothing tells people who others are before they have even spoken and can express important information or misinformation about us as people, but also how it makes references to what's happening outside of the show, like the global social movements such as Black Lives Matter. And in the first image on the left is of Luke Cage, and he's wearing a hoodie similar to the one worn by Trayvon Martin before he was fatally shot for being black and looking aggressive. I also found that black males are victimised as being suspicious, and this reinforces stereotypes that black males are criminals and aggressive, which can be seen in the second image. However, from my research, I did find that both of these shows were challenging the stereotypes, even though there is still elements of them in it, as they were showing more softer sides and caring, and that there were family men, and that they wanted to protect communities. So it was, even though there were still elements of stereotypes, they were challenging and changing the stereotypes through different alternative narratives that we're used to seeing.
And thanks, Emma. That's really interesting. Do you think it's fair to say as well, what was kind of really interesting about these two programs is that they were based on Marvel Comics, where you actually had black heroes, and that in itself is quite a new thing.
Yeah. They were adaptations of comic books that, you know, predominantly have shown white heroes, but to have this new image for, you know, and a better image representation for young black males to look up to is the right way to go, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So it's great to see that research, it gives us a bit of hope for the future, especially with everything that's going on at the moment with the Black Lives Matter movement. So really helpful, Emma, really, really interesting. Has anyone, we've got a little tiny bit of time, has anyone got any questions for Emma or any thoughts? Anybody watched Luke Cage or Black Lightning? Got appreciation from Mason, which is great. If not, well, really topical, and that's what I thought. And yeah, it was really topical, and then even more topical as the year went on. Emma, did you want to answer Nisha's question and say a little bit more about how you did your research?
No, I just analysed the first two series of each show by using a method of analysis called semiotics, which looks at lights and symbols, which could be like clothing, makeup, the camera angle, lighting, as well as actual like proper signs, like, you know, there might be a book and why that book's relevant within that scene, and or a street sign and what that street sign's saying. That's the way I analysed my research.
Yeah, thank you, Emma, and thanks everyone. Really great to have your ideas to think about in relation to Emma's. I think the stereotypes you talked about are very much related to what Emma found in her research when she did that literature review. So it's really. So we're going to move on now and hear a bit about Mason's research. So Mason's fit into a general theme that we've called waste and consumerism. So Mason, I'll pass over to you.
Hello, thank you, Catherine. Hi, everyone. During my course, all these modules have influenced my choices, especially the Global Perspective module that I've done in year 2. Okay, oops, go back. Okay, how I chose my research and how I got interested in. My research was on plastic, as plastic topic was and still is a complex hot topic at the moment. It has been highlighted through the media, and there have been many campaigns highlighting its effects to the environment and the land and the marine, especially after the Blue Planet program. In addition, in January 2018, China banned imports of plastic waste. And since the ban, the media have been highlighting the fears that the UK was heading towards a recycling crisis. So as the UK sends 2/3 of its plastic waste to China. So I thought I want to focus on plastic waste, and from that I supermarkets. And the reason I've chose, okay, slides. When I had to just go back, sorry. Yeah. So my topic was leading supermarkets in the UK, the war on food plastic packaging, and the supermarkets' visions and actions. The reason I've chose the supermarkets was because supermarkets play the middleman role, where we as individuals get most of our plastic through products and shopping. Supermarkets are suppliers of these products, and some of the supermarkets are manufacturers as well of their own brands. My aim was to evaluate the UK's supermarket approach to managing plastic waste. So yeah, so what I did to carry on the research, I've done a bit of reading to get a background information, and I've sent supermarkets, the participant supermarkets, I've sent them some questionnaires and then carried out some observations in store. And now I would like you all to just have a think of what do you think was like, what did I find after actually contacting supermarkets and going and carrying out observations at supermarkets. I mean, we all go and shop at supermarkets. So what do you think supermarkets are doing or can be doing to tackle the plastic issue? I'll just pass it down to Catherine, maybe.
Thanks, Mason. Yeah, so again, and well done for starting to lead that discussion. So again, you can share ideas on the slide or in the chat. What do you imagine happened? So what Mason did, she went and observed what do supermarkets seem to be doing at the moment. Do they seem to be trying to find ways to reduce using plastic packaging? And what do you think they said to Mason that they were doing? What do you think they said in the questionnaires? So, but really this is based on what's your experience of that. Interesting. So Andrea's talking about that move to were they using paper-based packaging. Raquel's not convinced they're doing enough. But interested to see, does Mason's research show otherwise? We've got supermarket managers will say they're doing their best. Yeah, so we're confident that's what they might say. Interesting. Supermarkets might be trying, but it feels as though there's probably still a long way to go. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Anyone observed anything themselves of things changing because of this worrying about plastic, or things that you think should be changing? Yeah, to go on the slide, just to click on the T above the slide to start typing if you want to type on the slide, but it's also fine to use the chat. Any other thoughts? Anything that people have noticed where you think actually they're using plastic there and they don't need to be, or why do they use plastic packaging in that context? Responding to public opinion may not be progressing enough. Yeah, interesting. So they've obviously had this big pressure, but is that giving them enough pressure, or do they need to be getting more support from the government maybe about it? Some will say packaging necessary to protect food in transit. Yeah, so if you're not using plastic, are there good alternative materials that can be used? Hi, Asari. We've got a new attendee to the session. You're very welcome. Individual approach to use of plastics has not changed much, so that's interesting. So that's also thinking, and that does relate, I'm not going to give it away, but that does relate to Mason's findings. Maybe individuals aren't necessarily changing their behaviour as much as you would think they would, given the pressure. And there's an idea, so they seem to be using less of the non-recyclable plastic waste. That's a bit of an observation, and trying to reduce, especially disposable, that really quickly disposable plastic. Andrea, really good point. The change to paper straws was so quick, it shows that different materials can be used and people will accept alternatives. And we've got some companies are changing packaging and shouting loudly about it. So to get those green credentials, absolutely. So there's that business motivation to do it. But I feel like I'm getting this sense of, what am I getting this sense of? What was I going to say? I'm getting this sense that it's a bit of cynicism about, are they actually doing enough? Hi, Solomon. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to share my personal opinion on this issue.
Yeah.
We usually do shopping at Asda, and one time I picked a plastic bag of Asda, and unfortunately I forgot to scan the code. Then when I was going, I noticed none of their scan machine alerted that I've not scanned it. So I approached the shopkeepers and I said, "Oh, I forgot to scan, but nothing alerted that I've not scanned it." So they said, "Oh, no, that's fine, that's fine." So I got to my car and I said, "Well, so if 10 people will not scan to pay for the plastic bag, it means people will be using more plastic bags, and it's like for free, and then nothing will be done with the system." So when I got home, I made a policy at home that, well, now we will be storing our plastic bag in the car boot. The idea was, if I'm going to do shopping and I already have a plastic bag in the car boot, it will remind me rather than taking a new one in the shop. So I think that is helping us in doing a reuse of the plastic bag instead of picking a fresh one always at the supermarket. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Solomon. And it's really great to hear what you've done. Yeah, I mean, I found it takes a little bit of kind of thinking in your head, but then you can change your habits so it just becomes second nature to do it. But yeah, I found that as well, that even though there is that cost for the plastic bag, I've also accidentally walked off with that one, with one, and unfortunately for me, Solomon was much better. He realised before he left the shop. I realised after I left the shop and was too embarrassed to go back. But it's easily done, so that's a worry because that's a big motivation for people to get into that individual habit to change. I think there's one more really interesting idea on here. I'm just going to read out because it's interesting for us all to think about. Lockdown might send plastic use up. Yeah. And the thing about lockdown, there are some environmental benefits because for a while everybody stopped driving, planes stopped flying. So in terms of the bigger environmental benefits, there's quite a lot that people noticed and just started moving back into areas because humans weren't there. But yeah, I think the amount of disinfecting and the amount of plastic, because for hygiene reasons, I think that's really interesting. It would be interesting if we could send Mason out to do the research again to see if things have changed back because of that. Anyway, on that note, thanks everybody for sharing, really great sharing of lots of ideas. I'm going to pass back to Nate Mason to find out what.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. It's amazing. You should see the smile on my face when I'm reading everybody notes because I've been working on this research for 2 years. And the comments are all related, fantastic comments. I'll share with you my two main findings. A lot of what you've all said do relate. Supermarkets do think they're doing enough, and they do think that within the next 3 to 5 years, they will be able to have 100% recyclable packaging. But yet when I went and actually did an observation in the two participant supermarkets, all the fruits and vegetables, as you can see in the photos, were all wrapped, even the bananas. So obviously what the supermarket said, representative said in the questionnaire, was not what I really found when I went and did an observation. And I think that's the good thing about packing the questionnaire with actually going physically there and doing an observation to see. One of the main things that as well that I've found out when I went and did my observation was that sustainable packaging, all the recyclable packaging were higher prices, while the non-recyclable packages, like for example the Smart Price and own brand foods and packages, were all non-recyclable, while all the luxury and the special brands were in recycling packaging, which means obviously this impacts the customer choices. So customers who want to be environmental friendly and choose recyclable packaging, they will have to pay more. And I thought that was a bit of a disadvantage there. Yeah, so this is here on this screen as well. You can see with the French fries, with the chips, the Smart Price chips was £1.06, and that was in a non-recyclable packaging, and the own brand as well was in a non-recyclable packaging, while the special brand was in a recyclable packaging, but that was for £1.37. So it's quite interesting, and I think the reason for that, obviously, the cost of the recycling packaging cost more. So supermarkets have been saying that they are trying to find cheaper alternatives. My second main finding, which was interesting as well, that supermarkets were highlighting how customers wanted less plastic packaging and always asked for less plastic packaging in campaigns and stuff, but yet when they actually come to the supermarket, they choose the most perfect products. And sometimes when you have to bring your own containers or refillables, it's not very convenient, so they always go for the more for the most perfect product, and want more convenience as well, which is quite tricky. So it will take time, and it takes everybody really to work. So it's not just the supermarkets who have to change their ways. I think us as consumers as well have to adapt our behaviors and shopping behaviors. The supermarkets have highlighted as well that for them to make changes is not as easy, because some of the supermarkets, they're not the manufacturers of their own brands. So their products come from international factories which manufacture products for everyone. And I think there where the global perspective comes from. Because then I started thinking that for one supermarket to get a product that's recyclable with recyclable packaging, that manufacturer have to actually adapt that packaging for everyone, especially if they work globally and they send their stuff internationally. So it was very interesting, and I would love actually, Catherine, to go back and see what happened now after the lockdown. Yeah, that might be a thing for further studies, maybe masters.
Yeah, really interesting. So thanks, Mason. Really interesting stuff. And I just want to direct everyone back for a second in your heads to something Mason said quite quickly at the beginning of the rationale, when she was saying that one of the rationale for doing this piece of research is that China was starting to say they weren't going to accept the amount of waste from our country that we had been sending.
Yes.
And that's just, you know, for me, when I first, so some of my research that I've done myself has been thinking about waste. And I didn't realise until I started doing research in it that we send most of our waste that we produce in this country, we send to other countries to deal with. So we send some of it to China, we send some of it to West Africa, and it causes health issues for those other countries. But the motivation for those countries is they get paid to take it. So it really is a global issue. We can't say we're not connected to other countries, because other countries are having to deal with our waste, and what we produce and what we know more famously from planet Earth is that the material that we throw away, it doesn't actually completely go away, it always ends up somewhere, and is having that global impact. So thank you so much to Mason and to Emma. You were both amazing, and as Olivia's saying, with all the other stuff that you've got going on, this is two people who are parents, you know, who have been working through it, volunteering, getting all that different work experience, juggling multiple modules. It's really impressive that you've managed to do such interesting research and have the time to share it with us today. So I'm incredibly impressed. And you both, I bullied you both into keeping time, and you did. So well done. So I wanted to ask, because we've called this session Living Locally, Thinking Globally, and I wanted to ask a bit of a question of you all, really. Would you see yourself as a citizen of the world? And are we citizens of the world? And what makes us global citizens? Citizens of the world, not just the local area. So this is a bit of a big question, but I'm hoping that you'll go with it. You could be inspired by the presentations that we've just heard. How do they help us think of the fact that we're living in a global world rather than just a national or a local one? Or you could be inspired by your own experiences or observations. Any thoughts about this idea? Would you see yourself as a citizen of the world? Or what examples can you come up with of the way you're connected to the global world? Any thoughts? Could be examples of how we're connected, or you could be saying, no, you don't think we are. Yes, we are through media. Really good example. So yeah, we're now able to get information from across the world. We're able to know what's going on. And as Emma said, Netflix is a global thing, so it means that TV and film is being accessed globally. We're connected to the rest of the world because we all live on the same planet, so ecology concerns affect us all. Absolutely. So waste tells us that. What's happening with the climate tells us that. Ecology is that idea that we're all living beings are connected and we all have an impact on each other. So absolutely, we've got lots of ideas coming through now. We're polluting it, so there's important but worrying ways to think about this idea that we're global citizens. Our food comes from all over the world. Really, really good point. It's difficult to think of a meal that you could have unless you're growing it all yourself and you keep your own animals that is totally local to you. What affects one part of us affects us all. And that reminds me a bit of the picture that we used to introduce this session of the people and trees all connected. So there's a positive way to think about that, and there's a worrying way to think about that connection. The coronavirus itself, we chose not to have a session on the coronavirus because it is nice to have a break, but it's a really good way of thinking about how we're citizens of the world. It connects us globally. It's an international pandemic and no country has been able to escape from it. And most countries had a lockdown. Politics is deciding too much for the world, and that's interesting. To think about who has the power, who has the power to make an impact in the world. Are decisions being made in the right way? Interesting to think back for anyone who comes to the Leadership for a Changing World session. Have we got the right kind of leadership? We've got a nice purple idea here, so we need other countries for the things that we've come to rely on, especially with all the technology we use. Yeah, so we can't just close our borders and say we're in the UK and that's it. We need other countries. We're connected to other countries. We've got social media, absolutely. Journalism, TV and movies connecting us. TV and movies that can help us understand other people, other cultures, make that connection, or they can, as Emma was talking about, kind of solidify stereotypes and be quite negative. So there's different ways. We've got Andrea here. We mostly shop globally using the internet. Yeah, really good point. We're able to shop much further afield now. And also, if you think of companies like Amazon, they're multinational companies. So they're not companies restricted by nation as well. So Amazon employees are all over the world. And the way that products are getting manufactured is global as well. So one of the worries, business worries about Brexit, was if you change the way borders and trade works in Europe, you potentially make it difficult to put a car together because one country is producing some parts of the car, another country other parts of the car. So it all gets really complicated. I feel as though, so we've got banking and politics is global here. I feel as though we're saying yes to this question. And we're raising both the positives and the concerns for it, but what we seem to be saying as a group is, yeah, we are citizens of the world and we can't get away from it. What I wish we had time for, but I do want to move on so we can hear from Nisha and hear a bit more about the programme, a future conversation and something you can go away with and think about is how can we think about this idea of being citizens of the world in a positive way? How can we be positive global citizens? What responsibilities do we have to other people, to other countries, to have a positive world? But absolutely, I think that awareness that people are talking about on here and that idea that our actions matter and what we do impacts on other people is a really strong part of how we can create that positive sense of the world. Okay, so I'm going to move on and just reflect a bit on what's just happened in that session. With the help of Emma and Mason and learning about their research, we've all been developing our academic skills. Everybody's been contributing, so I've really loved hearing your contributions and reading them. What academic skills have you been developing in this session that are relevant to professional studies and university study? Well, you've been developing communication skills, you've been building on each other's ideas, thinking about the research from Emma and Mason. They both got you involved with thinking about an aspect of their research, and then you could adjust that thinking once you found out what they found. So that adjustment and that thinking about your own examples and comparing them to what other people are saying, that's a really strong academic skill of analysis and of criticality. So I think there might have been points here where your own assumptions were challenged, or where you just learnt to think about something in a slightly different way by listening to others. You were all taking on board new ideas when you were listening about that research. And everybody engaged in a bit of interdisciplinary thinking. That last conversation we had there, but also in the two research presentations. So we had sociology, we were thinking about different ideas of society, philosophy there, a bit like who are we, what is the citizens of the world, how does that work? Business, what's the business case for thinking about global citizenship? Healthcare and hygiene, you're bringing up the coronavirus, the connection between thinking about healthcare and then thinking about the environment. We had Emma talking about culture and representation. People were mentioning politics. So when we say professional studies as an interdisciplinary degree, that's what we're talking about really. All of those different issues coming in to thinking about those crucial contemporary issues like what it means to be a citizen of the world. So I want you to all, you could use an emoji to do this, or just do it in the privacy of your own home. Give yourselves a round of applause, and that includes giving Emma and Mason a round of applause. This session wouldn't have worked without them, but also it only really works if you all get involved in the discussion. So I'm going to give you a bit of a round of applause. Should do that closer to the microphone. Really, really great stuff. Yay! Cool. So I'm just going to move on now and say a little bit more about what professional studies is, just to introduce you to the team. I'm here as the programme manager. We've got Rose, who would have loved to have been here. She's on leave this week, but she's actually in charge of the research strand. And she's really got a passion for research, and she says that research is one of the ways we can change the world and empower ourselves with knowledge. So we've just seen Emma and Mason doing that. We've got Lisa, who's one of our new teaching fellows, who teaches on our health and society and creative interventions in the city modules. And then Rachel, who's our academic skills tutor, but she also teaches the employability module. So there are other people who teach on the team, but that's our main team. Okay, so I just want to go back to what I was saying about what professional studies is, because now that you've had the taste, it puts this in a different context. So it's a degree especially designed for mature students, people coming in with that life experience, work experience. And that means as well that we know that you're juggling lots of things. So it's also a degree where you get a lot of support and acknowledgement of that important knowledge and experience that you're bringing in. As I said, when we started the interdisciplinary strand, we look at contemporary issues that affect us all, such as globalisation, diversity and technology, from that wide range of perspectives. The professional and project strand, you develop those research skills, and we've had a really good showcasing of the kind of research you can get involved in doing. And there's also modules like employability in a changing world, where you think about your own career development and what skills that you need to develop to get into different career options. And then you've got the third strand, the pathway or discovery strand, where you can either choose modules from within the Lifelong Learning Centre, fitting with the things that we specialise in, such as business management, child and family studies, learning and teaching, or creative writing. Oh, what's happening to the slides? Just let me get back to that. Or you can, you can do discovery modules from across the university. So those could be modules in sociology, law, the School of Environment, languages, philosophy, cultural studies. Really, the choice is too much for me to list now. Okay, and this is a slide to show you the teaching is very interactive. I wanted to show you some of this is actually a photograph from a previous taste today. So I'm very sad that we're not all in the same room together. We have to imagine that this is what's happening. It's to emphasise some of the titles of the modules: Exploring Diversity, Health and Society, Global Perspectives. You will get, as a follow-up to this session, a sheet that details those modules a bit more. And what I want to do now is pass on to Nisha because I've talked too much. So hopefully Nisha will be able to hear you. And the way we're going to do this is I'm just going to ask Nisha some questions. If that's okay, Nisha, do you want to say hello so we can check whether we can hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, that's perfect.
Oh, good, good.
Yes. So
Okay.
did you want to start by telling us a bit about your learning journey? So how did you make the decision to return to education and come on to professional studies?
Yeah, okay, so...
Oh, Nisha, we've lost you. Hi, Nisha, I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Nisha?
Can't hear Nisha. I think she's lost that connection. She's just trying to reconnect. So apologies for the delay, everyone.
So in the delay, is there anyone that's got any questions or thoughts about what I've just been talking about, or we're just waiting for Nisha to come back? And what we might do, because we have got a little bit of time,
to do the English GCSE.
Nisha. So Nisha, could you start again? We lost you. So could you start again by telling us about your learning journey and then how you came onto professional studies? Thank you.
Oh no, okay, sorry.
No worries.
I don't know where I got cut off, but basically it's a little bit random. But I was a self-employed childminder. I don't know if you heard that. For sort of around 13 years. And when my mum retired, she said, right, I want to do something for you now. And she wanted to look after my 1-year-old. And she told me that I could do whatever I wanted to do, work-wise or whatever. But anyway, I decided I was going to go to college. So I kept working and went to college 2 mornings a week to do English and maths. I had kind of had my first setback there because I wanted to do English GCSE, and when I went to do the test, basically they said to me I had to start off at a lower level than GCSE. So I was a bit like, okay, that was a bit of a setback straight away. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I did level 1 English, then I did English GCSE, and I kept doing maths for the 2 years. So I did maths for 2 years and two lots of English. Passed my English GCSE. I did make some phone calls to the universities, and they were that I was going to have to do an access course, which was going to be quite far away for me to get to. Anyway, so I kind of just didn't think about that for a little bit. And then it was actually an event for my children that was run by a place called University. And I saw a stand there they had some information from the Lifelong Learning Centre, and I don't think it was representatives, but they had some leaflets. And so that's how I found out about the Lifelong Learning Centre. Made some phone calls, and then I did the Jumpstart course, which was when I really realised that this is what I want to do. It was a 10-week, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 10-week course, which I did it was in the January, and that's when I just realised that this is what I want to do. Like, I definitely want to do this. I'd had quite a few other setbacks along the way as well, but just the learning style and just realising that it was nothing like school. It was just brilliant. I just loved it, even from everything, from the building, from walking into the Parkinson building. I loved every little bit of it. So that was kind of how I got there. So English for 2 years, maths for 2 years. Yeah, that's my journey so far to get to university. Yeah, does that covers
Yeah,
everything? Yeah.
yeah, it has. Really, really interesting, and there will be information also shared about the Jumpstart course. I
Yeah.
remember, it's funny, I do remember you on that course because I came in to do a guest session, and I
Oh,
remember how enthusiastic and keen you were there. So,
okay.
so it's great, and
Yeah.
I should tell everyone, you know, how many children do you have this year? Is it 4?
Yeah. Well, I have 3 that are at home and 2 that are grown up. So
Yeah.
I had 5 at the time as well. Really.
So you had a lot going on through all of this as well. So really impressive.
Oh,
So
thank
could
you.
you say a bit more about how you designed the degree? So we've talked about there's that third where you can choose your own modules. What sort of modules did you choose, and what were some of your highlights? Can you give people a flavour of that?
Yeah, so I had the base of the Lifelong Learning Centre, which was first and foremost really important, because that was kind of what helped out really the most, because it was other mature students. We had children, we had families, we had commitments, mostly, not everybody, but we were all mature students. So there was a kind of understanding that we hadn't come through university in the traditional route, sort of thing. So that was my base, and that was what made it, I think, really important for me. And so I had lessons with other mature students, which was good. But then I also did go off I call it going off into the university. I don't know if it was all the university, but I just always think of it as like wandering off into different areas where I might have been the only mature student. So that's kind of how I think of it. But through doing that, I was able to pick topics that really complemented what I was doing in the Lifelong Learning Centre as well. So I think people have mentioned, like, we did a diversity module, and then I found out that I was quite interested in that, kind of anything to do with inequalities, whether it's gender, poverty inequalities, race, anything like that. I was very interested in, and it kind of got me working really hard in those topics. So I also went out into university and picked other things around.
Oh, we've lost you again, Nishi.
Sorry,
That's okay. I can hear you again now. Yeah.
it's my phone. Yeah, it's because I'm on my phone. Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
yes, I went out into the university and picked modules that complemented what I was already doing, and that's what really helped with my grades and stuff, because I was kind of studying things twice sometimes. So I might have been doing popular culture, ethnicity, race, and popular culture, and during that I would do things around identity and discrimination, and then that tied in with my dissertation. So I was like studying different modules but similar topics, which really helped me. And then within the Lifelong Learning Centre, I did something like, for example, counselling skills. And within the counselling skills, I also learned a lot about myself, which also helped with my studying and just life in general. So I did a variety, very big variety of topics.
Yeah, no, sounds really, really interesting. And because you mentioned your dissertation, just want to give a tiny flavour of what you researched.
So I'd researched. I wanted to research the experience of Caribbean migrants coming to Britain post World War II, and their experiences. So kind of like that Windrush time, and sort of looking at their experiences and how they felt on arrival. And it kind of turned into a lot of work around identity and discrimination and race issues, but a lot around identity and how people identify, or what we choose to identify with. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And again, so Nisha interviewed people in Chapeltown, so first generation Windrush migrants. And really important research that you got to do those interviews, and again really relevant for everything that's happened with that community. Cool. So my final question to you is, what are you doing now, and what did you do after the degree?
Right. So what am I doing now? So I'm trying to remember now. So in my final year, I could talk about it for hours because it's just so much to talk about. But in my final year, I started volunteering at a young person's charity called the Marketplace, and I started volunteering there once a week, and I did that for a year. So then when I was about to graduate, a job came up, so I applied for the job. So the title is youth work, however it's mental health support, and so I do that, working with young people from 11 to 26 birthday. But through that I've done other things as well. So I've done a secondment with the NHS, which was looking at sort of advising them really on their work with young people, and looking at ways that they could be more young person friendly, sort of, for want of a better word, kind of looking at their way that they work with young people. So that was my first secondment for 6 months. I had to write a report at the end of that. And then now I'm doing a different secondment, which is more like it's a managerial role, so it's working with staff more now. So it's more supporting staff who are working with young people, and that's a brand new service. So we're just that's crisis service. So it's still mental health, but it's a crisis support, and so I'm supporting staff with that one. So so that's new.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And just really briefly, are there ways that you can connect what you learned on the degree to that work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I'd say like it's difficult to pinpoint to one thing, but it's kind of everything as well, if that makes sense. Like it's just being constantly open-minded, constantly. I think the biggest thing for me is always challenging everything, like as in like question everything. Somebody tells you something, find out where they found out from. Like, don't just accept it. So having an open mind, but taking it a step further, and actually being able to challenge somebody if they sort of if you feel like they're maybe either being negative or just anything really. Just like I think the university teaches you to question things, and not settle for something that you think is not right or doesn't sound right. Yeah, so I always think about where's the evidence for that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I also should say, you've always impressed me, Nisha, but you sound so confident now. So I think
Really,
that confidence,
I'm not.
I think that,
Okay.
I think that well, it's good. I think that confidence has come from the degree, and also then from the work that you've done. I just have to say, so Solomon's asking a question.
Oh, I'm typing now. Yeah, it's okay. I'll answer it. I'll just answer.
That's okay. I just know I didn't want you to have to do too many things at once.
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, my husband's Ghanaian, so that's where it comes from.
Brilliant. And my brother's wife is Ghanaian as well. I didn't realise there was that Ghanaian connection. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're going off topic.
I think we did. I think we talked about it, but maybe we did.
Did we? I'd forgotten. Okay, brilliant. So, an unexpected global Ghanaian connection at the end there, which is exciting.
Yeah.
So, let's move on. So, Nisha is in at the bottom right of this photo that you can see. This is the year that Nisha graduated. I think was that 2018.
Yes.
And it's just because one of the main, we're just going to moving on to the final part of the session. So thanks so much, Nisha. It was really great to hear from you and hear a bit more about your story. I'm very excited that Solomon is from Ghana as well. Obviously destined to have that Ghanaian connection today. Very exciting. Just to say, because what we often get asked is, what can you do with a professional studies degree? And we can talk about that more in the question and answers. I just wanted to go through some of the things that people have done. So we've got people now working for the Home Office, one person supporting the Gypsy and Traveller community, one person looking at asylum seekers, I think. We've got people working for community support organisations, including Nisha, that we just heard from, someone working in staff support for the Care Quality Commission. We've had a few people that have gone on to train to become teachers, either in primary school or further education, and someone that's working as a business manager for the NHS, someone that's working in prison education, and a housing officer for the Leeds City Council. So it's just to show there's a real range of graduate positions you can go into from professional studies. Amazing, just found out Mason's applied for a master's degree in global development, and we've also had people doing master's degrees in international business, social research, social work and intercultural understanding. And one of our graduates, Roland, is just applying to do a PhD in business and law, looking at another not Ghanaian connection, but African connection. He's looking at the African Trade Association and how that can be empowered to have more of a global impact. So if I'm quite greedy, if I could have had it, I'd have him in this session as well. And Roland is just the back left there, so he graduated the same year as Nisha. So stop showing off about my students and move on to the final part of this session. Oh, amazing. And Emma's applied for a master's in society, media and culture. Emma will have to catch up about that at a different time. That sounds fascinating. Tell me in the chat if that's at Leeds or somewhere else. That's very exciting. Okay, so, and as you can tell, what we really like to do is get to know our students and find out what happens next, because they're always such inspiring journeys. This is the opportunity now for people to raise any questions. So this could be questions for me or from any of the students that we've heard from, or the community and partnerships team are here. So has anything that we've talked about raised any questions that you would like to raise at this point? Again, you can raise your hand or you can put something in the chat. At Leeds, very similar. Oh, yes. Brilliant. So Emma's answering my question, which is brilliant. So that's exciting that you'll still be at Leeds. And Mason, thank you. You're amazing too. Like, we are lucky on professional studies to have such great students and such a diverse range of students. I'm hoping what this taster session has done is shown you that. One of the benefits of professional studies is that you're all learning from each other as well. So you've got people doing all these different modules and having this different life experience, but then coming back onto the professional studies modules and learning from each other. Any questions? Maybe they've been answered. Anything people want to ask Mason or Emma? Mason saying good luck to everyone. Absolutely.
Can I ask a question, Catherine?
Absolutely, go for it, Olivia.
Sorry to interrupt, I should have put my hand up. I just wanted to see if any of the students had any thoughts on how they manage their time around family and other responsibilities, because obviously they were all studying professional studies full time as far as I know, and how that worked in terms of the time at university and time for family and other things.
Yeah.
Nisha?
Do you just answer? Do you want me to
go for it. Go for it.
Oh,
yeah.
So I think that was something that I was sort of worried about or concerned about. But I think because what helped me is because I was picking subjects myself, and also the one.
Oh, Nisha, we've lost you. We've lost you again, Nisha. So just while we're waiting for Nisha to come in again, Mason's talking about the timing. We try to make sure. Yeah, Mason, did you want to talk a bit?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a parent, I've got 3 children myself, doing professional studies full time I did not find any problem doing that because most of the lectures started at 10 o'clock. So I had the chance to drop kids off at school and go straight to university, and we will all be in the class by 10 o'clock for the start of the sessions. And then usually the second session finishes at around 2:30, so that we all had enough time to go back and pick kids up if we want to. And even the days I wanted to stay at university and go to the library or do some extra reading or studies, I could leave my kids in after-school clubs, which I got a grant for as well. So there was no problem at all. And usually during school holidays, the modules that we did through the Lifelong Learning Centre, we had a week off or whatever, you know, like midterms, holidays and stuff. So that was never a problem as well. So I don't think that should be a barrier. If you're a parent, just go for it. You will be able to manage. At home, I'll usually just work and study after I put kids to bed. So that's what I did.
And I know that it can be a juggle. And sorry, Nisha, we lost you.
Oh, you
so
lost it again. It's my phone. It just keeps cutting me off. No, I don't know what you heard, but I think another thing I've just thought of as well, when Mason was talking, is that I did definitely do that as well sometimes. The after school, the after bedtime studying. But sometimes also I got really tired as well. At that time of night, so I used to just study with the children as well, and they just, I mean, I was lucky in that they're very sort of the kind that did like sitting down and writing and stuff like that, but they all had their own binders and they all had their own folders and they used to study with me. So whatever I was doing, they were studying alongside me, like their own things. I used to talk to them about what I was studying. They were a massive part of my Olivia just said the word behaviour. They were a massive part of my journey. So on campus as well, there are a lot of opportunities to bring the children to the university, whether it's a teddy bears picnic that someone's organised, well, not somebody, but like Jenny or Paul have organised, or whether it's a Christmas party or a Halloween party. But the main thing is, what I'm saying is, I think, is that the children are a big part of what I was doing as well. So they studied with me, they were part of my journey, they were a part of everything that I did, and they came onto campus a lot of times, you know, so they knew what I was doing. And there is sacrifices, they did sacrifice a lot of my time, so they also knew that you know, when I was studying, I needed to kind of do that as well. So I'm not saying that like it was always easy, but they did do it with me, if that makes sense. And the older ones watched me as well, you know. And my daughter's just graduating now this year, so so if she says that, that's kind of through watching me as well. So it's a family affair.
Yeah, and I think that's great. It works really well for people if they get their family involved. So you're all on that journey together. So many professional studies students talk about being a role model, but also trying to do that work with their kids. And it's not to say it's easy and that it always works, but it is definitely to say that it's possible. You've heard what Mason and Emma and Nisha are juggling. But they were able to do it, and they all came out with really brilliant degrees. I'm aware of the time, so I think I'm going to move on and hand over to Olivia, who's just going to do the final part of the session.
Thanks very much, Catherine. And Nisha, Emma and Mason, you are all absolutely incredible. I mean, you're role models to your children, but you're role models to anyone else who might be thinking about study and might be worried about some of these issues of childcare and other things you're balancing. So thank you so much for finding time in your busy lives to join us today. Just a couple of things before we finish. Thank you to all of us for staying with us this afternoon. One thing that does really worry people, I know it's always the elephant in the room is student finance, and we just wanted to reassure you that there is financial support for adults entering higher education. As long as you're doing your first degree and you have your residency status to remain in the UK, you should be entitled to a loan from the government that pays your tuition fee. So that means that you don't need to stump up the cash to pay for a degree. You don't start paying that back until you're earning, I think it's nearly £27,000 a year. and it's a very minimal amount. You're paying about £30 a month when you're on that kind of salary. So really this finance shouldn't put you off. There's also additional support for your living costs that's dependent on your income, some in the forms of loans that work exactly the same way as the tuition fees, and some in the form of grants. And Mason, you very helpfully mentioned the childcare grants. So some people can get up to 85% of their childcare costs covered, and that can go to any registered childcare provision. It doesn't just have to be nurseries, childminders for little ones. As you said, it can be for after school clubs as well. And there's also additional support if you have disabilities, and the debt doesn't go with you. So if you have a family and you're worried about passing debt on to them, it's wiped after 30 years. Whatever you haven't paid off is gone. So basically the way it works is if you don't earn a graduate wage of £27,000, you don't pay it back. If you start to earn it and then your hours change and your wage goes down, you stop paying it back. So it really isn't unaffordable for people to access higher education. And we will be having a session on student finance next Thursday, student finance in HE at 2 p.m. So please do join us for that. It's on the Lifelong Learning Centre's Eventbrite pages, so you can access everything that's coming up there. I'll just put the link in the chat now if I can figure out how. There you go. And then do remember, if you haven't already contacted us for a guidance appointment, it would be great if you could do so. Denise or Mohammed would love to hear from you over the summer. You can ring or email. The details are on this slide, but they'll also be in the follow-up email that we send you. And that's a chance to talk through all your options in higher education, not just professional studies, not just Leeds. It could be about doing something at college first. It could be about another university or another way of studying. They can guide you and support you to find the best options for you. Oh, and Nisha, thank you for adding in the chat that you got diagnosed with dyslexia in your second year and also got support from disability services. That's good to know. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that mature students will often have additional needs and additional issues and need support in different ways, and that's the university is all about making sure that they mature students can succeed to the same level as younger students who might not have those responsibilities. So thanks for adding that. And the grants, Mason, yeah, it's good to know that it helps you to spend more time at university and enjoy student life and not always be rushing back to collect the children. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for today's session. I hope you will join us for some of the other events that are coming up over the next week or so.